Hey everybody, welcome back to World History. This is our first section of second semester. So we're starting a new chapter today. In terms of what we need to get done today, we're going to do section 1. You're going to get some time to work on your review guide. Nothing too crazy today. Our learning objectives for today are to define ideology, which is also your bell ringer today, to identify countries who gained independence during this period, and to analyze the reasons why groups of people wanted to revolt against the European powers. So go and get your new notes document out, and let's get started. So it's important to understand this is an age of ideologies. The Congress of Vienna, remember we talked about that 2 chapters ago when we did the French Revolution. Those were the powers of Europe, and they were trying to stop those revolutionary seeds after the French Revolution. So Europe was then seeing a clash with people of opposing ideologies. To provide a definition, ideologies are systems of thoughts and beliefs. We're going to see competing ideologies throughout Europe. So it's important to understand conservatives are going to prefer the old order. The Congress of Vienna, if you remember when we finished Napoleon, this was a victory for conservative forces, mainly monarchs, nobles, landowners, and church leaders, because this further established the system that they were the ones in power. It supported the political and social order prior to Napoleon and the French Revolution, wanting to restore royal families under the idea of legitimacy and supporting a strict social hierarchy, where the lower classes should obey the upper classes. Excuse me. They also wanted an established church. Catholics were primarily in Austria and Southern Europe, Protestants in Northern Europe, and Eastern Orthodox churches in Eastern Europe. They believed that constitutional governments led to chaos. One of those major leaders was a gentleman by the name of Metternich. He wanted to utilize monarchs to suppress revolutions. We'll talk more about him in a minute. So, on the other side, we have to talk about liberals and nationalists. And to make sure I'm making that distinction, when I'm talking conservatives and liberals, I'm not talking about what the current political structure is in the modern day. When I'm using those two terms, when I'm mentioning conservatives, those are people that are wanting to preserve the old order. When I'm talking about liberals, these are people that want change. That is the distinction here. Make sure you keep that in mind as we're going through this section. So liberals, and nationalists are going to challenge conservatives, mainly because liberals spoke for the middle class, the bourgeois, and business owners, bankers, lawyers, and they supported governments based on written constitutions and the separation of powers. That sounds like those enlightened ideas from Montesquieu that we talked about in chapter 17. They also called for natural rights, things like liberty, equality, property. Sounds like John Locke. Again, they also wanted freedom of thought, religion, speech, and by the early 1800s, they only wanted male property owners to vote. That is going to change, though, and later on it's going to be universal manhood suffrage, meaning all adult men have the right to vote. They also wanted to elect rulers, a republic-style government, or a limited monarchy via a constitution. They also heavily embraced those laissez-faire economics we've been talking about, with free markets and capitalism being considered good. So for centuries, they're going to lose and gain land. But by 1815, Europe had several major empires and nationalities that we have to talk about. You have the Austrians, the Russians, and the Ottoman empires. They're all home to diverse groups of people, and we'll kind of talk a little bit about each one next chapter when we do World War I and how they are influenced by the war. But national groups are also going to start to acknowledge that they share a common heritage. And that idea of nationalism that we talked about 2 chapters ago also comes back. It gave people a sense of identity. It did often breed intolerance and lead to persecution of other groups, but it did help to start form a sense of identity for nation states. So eventually, revolutionaries are going to start to fight against the old order. What we're going to see with that is it's going to erupt in the Balkans, the southern part of Europe, basically Greece, primarily. And one of the countries in that region, Serbia, is going to seek independence. Well, the first time around, they're led by a leader named Karađorđe and rebel against the Ottoman Empire, and they fail. But it does lead to a revival of Serbian identity. A few years later, they're going to try again, and under the leadership of Milos Obnovic, and they're going to be successful because they're supported by Russians to an autonomy or self-rule. Eventually, the Ottoman Sultan will agree to independence, and they will gain their independence. But eventually, Serbia will be taken over by the Austrian Empire. We'll talk more about that next chapter. So eventually, Serbia's done it. Now Greece is going to revolt to end Ottoman rule. Years of suffering had led to cohesive Greek unity and national identity, and the Europeans supported the Greek rebels. Eventually, they forced the Ottomans to grant independence, and in the 1830s, Greece gets their independence. Europeans then pressured the Greeks to accept the German king, so they went from one empire to another. This went against those ideas of nationalism. Eventually, more challenges are going to erupt that challenge the Vienna peace settlement. Rebellions in southern Europe, new demands by liberals and nationalists are going to see social reforms being enacted. And by the mid 1800s, the urging industrial workers to support socialism or reorganizing property ownership was massive in Europe. So that is it for notes for today. What I need you guys to go do is you're going to go take the section 1 quiz, and then you're going to go work on your review guides. See you all next time. Bye, everybody.